Wunderschönen guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Herzlich willkommen im KOSMOS. Mein Name ist Reto Bühler. Ich mache Veranstaltungen hier im KOSMOS. Schön sind ihr da und trotz dem schönen frühlingshaften Wetter. Aber ich verstehe, warum wir da sind. Weil, ich muss gestehen, Stewart gehört zu meinen absoluten Lieblingsautoren schon seit vielen, vielen Jahren. Das sage ich jetzt nicht einfach so daher. Es ist tatsächlich so, ich mache sehr viele Veranstaltungen und sehr viele Lesungen. Aber ich habe selten einen Mann getroffen, der so wahnsinnig warmherzig, charming und einfach rundum ein geiler Sieg ist, muss man wirklich sagen. Er ist grossartig. Er verkörpert für mich so den guten Amerikaner, wo wir in letzter Zeit nicht so wahnsinnig viel davon haben. Er ist tatsächlich jemand, der über alles Bescheid weiß. Er ist ein ganz gescheiter, ganz toller Mann. 2006 haben wir uns das letzte Mal gesehen. Und er hat noch alles gewusst, was ich ihm dazu mal erzählt habe. Also so eine Art von Mensch ist er. Ich verschenke auch einen Großteil von seinen Büchern immer wieder auf Geburtstag. Also mein Lieblingsbuch, das ich immer verschenke, ist Prayer for the Dying. Das ist das Glück der anderen. Eines der großartigsten Bücher, finde ich, die ich jetzt gelesen habe. Und sicher zu den Top 10 von mir. Halloween, da haben wir zum Beispiel die Lesung gemacht. Dazu mal. Also ich habe eigentlich fast alles gelesen von ihm. Er hat über 20 Bücher geschrieben, mindestens. Wahrscheinlich sogar noch mehr mit den Sachbüchern zusammen. Er hat heute übrigens seinen 35-jährigen Hochzeitstag. Muss man auch mal zuerst schaffen. Seine Frau Judy ist auch da. Also herzlichen Applaus. 35 years. Hey. Hey. Huh? That's something. So, und jetzt gehe ich weg von der Bühne und übergebe den Profis das Rampenlicht. Herzlich willkommen. Anja Konzett, Moderation, Stewart und Anne, Author. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So it's a shame you don't understand Swiss German because that was the most loving introduction Reto has ever given. Thank you so much, Reto.
Well, Anya said he's your biggest fan.
Yes, I think he is.
And having seen Misery, you know you should be afraid of your biggest fan. No doubt. Yes.
True. So, welcome from me as well. My name is Anja Konzett, and I'm very happy to sit next to Stewart tonight, who has his book, Henry himself, out. In German, it's Henry Persönlich. And after all those loving, caring words of Reto, I think I will just let you read your first passage, if that's it.
Of course, of course. Well, first, Henry is a prequel. This is the third book I've written about this family. And the second book is about his wife, Emily. And when I knew I was going to write Emily's book, I reread To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, one of my favorite authors. And while I was rereading it, I found this passage that I thought was perfect to talk about Emily, because Emily's book is about living by yourself and surviving and enduring. And the quote I came from To the Lighthouse is, "Could it be, even for elderly people, that this was life, startling, unexpected, unknown?" Because she's always surprised by things that happen and by how much life is left for her. When I knew I was going to write about Henry, I knew that I had to go back and figure out who he was. In the other two books, he's already dead. So he's a ghost, he's a shadow, a shade, and I didn't really know him. All the characters have their version of Henry. The daughter Margaret has her version, the son Kenneth has her version, Emily has her version, his sister Arlene has her version, but we don't really know him. So I knew I'd have to go way, way back and figure out who he was from the very beginning. And so again, I went back to Virginia Woolf and I reread a book called The Years. And the quote that I took from The Years was, "What is the use of trying to tell people about one's past? What is one's past?" And so to open Henry, I go way back. This is called In Memoriam. His mother named him Henry, after her older brother, a chaplain killed in the Great War, as if he might take his place. In family lore, the dead Henry had been a soft-hearted boy, a rescuer of stranded earthworms and fallen sparrows, presaging his vocation as a saver of souls. Salutatorian of his seminary class, he volunteered for duty overseas, sending home poems and charcoal sketches of life in the trenches. At church, the stained glass window that showed a barefoot Christ carrying a wayward lamb draped about his neck like a stole was dedicated in loving memory of the Right Reverend Henry Leland Chase. The mock Gothic inscription, so elaborate it verged on illegibility. And each Sunday, as they made their way to their pew up front, his mother would bow her head as they passed, as if to point out once more his uncle's saintliness. When he was little, Henry believed he was buried there, that beneath the cold stone floor of Calvary Church, as below the medieval cathedrals of Europe, the noble dead moldered in cobwebbed catacombs, and that one day he would be there too. When Henry was 8, his mother enrolled him as an altar boy, a vocation for which he betrayed no calling, picking at his nails inside his sleeves through the weighted silences and turgid hymns, afraid he'd miss his cue. He had nightmares of arriving late for the processional in his baseball uniform, his cleats clicking as the holy conclave paraded down the aisle. The cross was heavy, and he needed to stretch on tiptoe with the brass taper to light the massive Alpha Omega candle. Funerals were the worst, held Saturday afternoons when all his friends would be at their secret clubhouse deep in the park. The grieving family huddled beside the casket, praying with Father McNulty for the repose of their loved one's soul. But once the service was done and the candles snuffed, the funeral director took charge, bossing around the pallbearers like hired porters as they lugged the box down the front steps and slid it into the hearse. Invariably, Henry pictured his uncle, his nose inches from the closed lid, on a train crossing bomb-pocked French farmland, or in the dark hold of a ship, cold water gliding by outside the thin steel skin of the hull. He had so many friends and well-wishers, the story went, that the visitation in their grandparents' front parlor, where his sister Arlene taught Henry to play heart and soul on their Baldwin, lasted 3 days and nights. Arlene was named after Arlene Connolly, his mother's favorite singer, which Henry thought unfair. To avoid confusion among company, his mother called him Henry Maxwell and his uncle Henry Chase, a nicety her side of the family dispensed with, christening him Little Henry. Henry, though not one to make a fuss, would have preferred a nickname of his own choosing, something rough and masculine like Hank or Huck. He thought Little Henry was bad luck, and in private moments, rooting through his father's workbench in the cellar for a spool of kite string, or of a rainy day, hiding from Arlene in the lumber room beneath the eaves, or after midnight, climbing the boxed back stairwell with a filched sticky bun, he felt watched over by a ghost neither kindly nor malevolent, merely a silent presence noting his every move like a judge. His mother never said precisely how his uncle had died, leaving Henry with a child's dire imagination to picture, in a flash, a German shell catapulting a rag doll of a doughboy through the air, scattering his limbs over a cratered no-man's land, one arm caught in a coil of barbed wire, the hand still clutching a small gold cross. On his mother's dresser, in a silver frame that captured fingerprints, surrounded by other, less interesting relatives from before Henry was born, stood a bleached Kodak of her brother on the dock at Chautauqua, proudly holding up a glistening muskie. Each time Henry snuck into his parents' bedroom to puzzle over this snapshot as if it were a clue to his future, he remarked that the fish, like his uncle, was long dead, while the dock and cottage were still there at the water's edge, awaiting them every summer like a stage set. But exactly how these facts were related, he couldn't say, only that he felt vaguely guilty looking at the young and happy, not yet Reverend Henry Chase, as if he'd stolen something from him. In the second section, I go even further back. This one's called Pedigree. The Pittsburgh Maxwells, no relation to the automakers or the coffee company, came from the moors of North Yorkshire with the main concentration around Skelton. Originally sheep herders and tenant farmers, after the signing of the Magna Carta, their descendants filtered into the village proper and became at first guildsmen and then merchants. One, John Lee Maxwell, ultimately serving as a tax collector and deacon in the Church of England. Generations later, an intrepid or maybe disgraced scion of that line, John White Maxwell, sailed on the Godspeed for the Virginia colony at Jamestown, there taking as his wife the 14-year-old Susanna Good. This, according to a genealogy compiled by a retired pharmacist from Olathe, Kansas, named Arthur Maxwell, a pair of which Emily, whose AOL address had been included in a mass email the week of Thanksgiving, purchased sight unseen as a Christmas present for their two grown children, Margaret and Kenny. Rather than gilt-edged, leather-bound keepsake editions, what arrived by regular mail in a crushed Amazon box were two overstuffed three-ring binders of cockeyed photocopies riddled with errors, both typographical and factual, including the incorrect year of his uncle's death. Henry made the mistake of laughing. "I'm glad you find it amusing," Emily said. "I paid good money for these." "How much were they?" "It doesn't matter. I'm getting it back." He doubted that was possible, but nodded thoughtfully. "It's fascinating stuff if it's true. It says here we were horse thieves." "I'm not happy. It was supposed to be a big gift. It's too late now anyway. At this point, I'm thinking I should just send them back." They'd been married nearly 50 years, and still he had to smother the masculine urge to counsel her on how the world worked. At the same time, agreeing with her too readily would be seen as appeasement, a worse offense. And so, as he often did on matters of little import, he chose the safest response: silence. "Nothing," she asked. "You have no opinion whatsoever." He'd forgotten. He wasn't allowed to be neutral. "I think it's interesting. Let's keep one for ourselves, at least." "Honestly," she said, backhanding the page she was reading, "I could do better than this. I'm going to send him an email." The holidays were hard on her. It didn't have to be the genealogy. It could be Rufus throwing up on the carpet, or some passing comment of Arlene's about her mashed potatoes. Lately, the smallest things set her off. And though in her looser moments she freely admitted that she'd always been a terror, an only child used to getting her way, as her husband, he feared her impatience hinted at some deeper frustration with life, and by extension, their marriage. In this case, his hope was that she would cool off and eventually relent, that the bother of repacking the binders and running them over to the post office would outweigh her anger. Her moods were fleeting, and the man had obviously done a lot of work. As if tabling the issue, she set the box out of the way, upstairs on the cedar chest in Kenny's old room, where it stayed well into the new year, until one day at lunch she asked if they had any packing tape. "Did you get your refund?" "Only after I bugged him a million times. He said we could keep them, but I'm not going to. He's got to understand he can't do this to people." Right. So his copy, too. A trader, he'd enjoyed finding out more about his Kentucky cousins and General Roland Pauling Maxwell, the hero of Yorktown. "I didn't want to tell you, but they were $60 apiece. For $60, they should be nice, and they're not." "I agree," he said, honestly shocked at the price. For all their differences, they were both cheap. "It's a shame, because I could have ordered other ones that were nicer." "It was a good idea. If you want to try, have at it. I'm not doing that again." "At least you got your money back." Again, he was missing the point. She'd wanted to do something special for the children, and it had turned into a debacle. He would never understand why she took these defeats to heart. There was nothing you could do about them. "I'm sorry," he said. "Why? It's not your fault. Just let me be angry. I'm allowed to be angry." He had to run out later and grab some new windshield wiper blades for the Oldsmobile. The post office was right on his way. "That would be helpful," she said, "if you don't mind." He didn't mind. So, alone in the Oldsmobile, cruising down Highland with the defrost going, he glanced over at the box on the seat beside him and frowned as if she'd tricked him. Thank you. Thank you. Everyday life. That's what I think Virginia Woolf is really, really good at. Just the skin of life, the daily domestic details. This continues the story in a section called Near Miss. He'd lived in Highland Park his entire life, so he could be excused if he thought of the stop sign at Bryant, installed over a decade ago, as new. But in truth, that afternoon, he never registered it. He was still picking at the knot of Emily's unhappiness when he realized a school bus was pulling out in front of him, tall as a boxcar, and that he'd ram it broadside if he didn't stop. Too late, the driver saw him and honked, and at the last second, Henry jammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, and the nose of the Olds dove. The box flew off the seat, smacked the dash, and bounced around the floor. He was short by a couple of feet. He was lucky the road was dry. "Damn it," he said, because he was at fault. The sign was behind him. He hadn't even seen it. The bus driver threw up his hands and glared. "Sorry," Henry said, and held up his own as if he meant no harm. Above him, children who might have been first graders peered down from the windows, pointing and making faces, bouncing on their seats like trampolines. He was the excitement. It was on the local news every night, the old fart who hit the gas instead of the brakes and ended up inside the dry cleaners. Henry expected the driver to jump out and yell at him, but the bus eased forward, clearing the intersection, and kept going. The car behind it waited for Henry to take his turn. He nodded, "Thank you." He wanted to protest that he was a careful driver, not like Emily, who couldn't see at night and four-wheeled over curbs. And the rest of the way to the post office and then coming home, he concentrated, lips pinched, eyes darting to cars peeking from side streets. It was one slip, but all it took was one, and he worried that it might have happened before. He just hadn't noticed. Near the tail end of his life, his father couldn't see well. When they visited him, all four corners of his bumpers were smudged with different colored paint. He refused to give up his license, even after being stopped repeatedly by the police for driving too slowly. After he died, Henry rolled up the garage door of his condo and discovered the whole front of his Cutlass was pushed in as if he'd hit a wall. His father had taught him to drive in the park, on the winding road that circled the reservoir. "The more room between you and the other fellow, the better," his father said. "You don't know what he'll do. All you can do is stay as far away from him as possible." Henry had tried to pass along this wisdom to his own children, but they thought they knew everything from taking driver's ed. As a teenager, Kenny totaled their station wagon on black ice one New Year's Eve, breaking Tim Pickering's leg, while Margaret, coming home late from a party, took down a section of the Prentice's fence that Henry made her pay for. He'd hoped their accidents might teach them a lesson. He wasn't sure they had. This time at Bryant, he stopped at the sign. When he got home, he three-pointed the Olds at the end of the drive and backed it into the garage perfectly straight, waiting for the rear tires to kiss the 2x4 he'd rigged. Emily was at the kitchen sink, peeling carrots. "How was the post office?" she asked. "Uneventful." It was only as he was hanging up his keys that he remembered the windshield wipers. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So much, Stewart. Everyday life, you said. When I was reading the book, something funny happened to me. I was reading it in my flat, and my flatmate sat down to me next on the couch, and he's not a big reader, let's put it that way. And he looked at the book title, and he asked, "So, what's Henry doing?" Somebody read the book.
And what did you say?
And I tried to do this really wonderful story justice by summarizing the plot, but then I realized while struggling to do so, it's the wrong questions. It's not what is Henry doing or what is happening to Henry. It is who is Henry. And who better to ask this question than the creator? So, Stewart, who is Henry?
Who is Henry? Henry seems to me very much like my grandfather. on my father's side. He's a little bit like my father. Also a little bit like my grandfather on my mother's side, a little bit like my father-in-law. Um, so he's a bit like the older generation in America right now, which is the largest generation that we have. That age demographic, the people between, say, 65 and 80. And he grew up in the middle of the 20th century, what is called sometimes the American century. He lived through the Depression. He fought in the Second World War. He came back. He got a job as a nuclear engineer. He worked on an atomic engine to send spaceships to Saturn. So he's lived this very, it seems very important and exterior life that is connected with history. And yet here at the age of 75, he's been retired for 10 years. He sort of putters around the house. He hangs around with the dog Rufus. He's always in the basement. He's always in the garage. He's always working out in the yard. He's always by himself. These dreams of excitement and adventure and conquest have led him back to a very quiet place where he doesn't quite know what to do with himself. And as you see in this first section, he's beginning to lose his strength. He's beginning to lose his reliability. And he's always considered himself very sharp and able to come up with answers to very practical questions. And now he can't do that anymore, and he doesn't know exactly what to do about it. He's not prepared.
Exactly. It's funny that you just explained it that way, because whilst I was reading it, I was thinking, how many Henrys have I encountered in my lifetime? And I think that's the most extraordinary experience that I had with this book, is the familiarity of a very ordinary man. Basically, well, he's extraordinary maybe in the point that he has a fairly happy marriage and a fairly happy life, but basically it's a old white man living his last days, worrying about his family and doing chores around the house.
Yeah.
And what is the power of the ordinary? I was asking myself that. Why is it so powerful? Why is it so fascinating to read about a man fixing up the drawer for his wife again and again, the kitchen drawer again and again.
Broken,
Yes, exactly, which is always broken. Why is it so engaging?
It's not high drama, right?
Yes. Yes. But what is it that fascinates you about the mundane?
Well, what's at stake, right? What finally is at stake? And what's at stake for Henry, as it's for everyone, is the people closest to him, the relationships that he has with them, and how those are changing because of what he's going through. He's beginning to lose those relationships. He's afraid of losing the world as he knows it. And every day it seems that some part of that world is lost. All of us are going to lose the world that we know, right? The people that we love are going to be taken from us simply by time. And so when I was writing about Emily in her book, and I'm writing about Henry in this book, it's all that effect of time and wanting to sort of stop time and hang on to what we have and to treasure what we have there, but not quite being able to grasp it there. Henry's always been a bit emotionally distant, whereas Emily's been very emotionally, maybe too forward there. And so he doesn't sort of chase after the other members of the family the way Emily does, but he's still worried about them and how he can connect with them, because he knows his time is running out. So there's in a way, there's a ticking clock. When you think of, a space film, right? There's always the self-destruct sequence. Self-destruct sequence initiated, 4, 3, 2, and this is happening to Henry on a very slow and very mundane level there. So as that clock is ticking, I think there's a bit of, I'll call it melodrama, actually. So it seems as if nothing is happening in the book, but of course, the very biggest things are happening, right? There's love, there's death, there's time, there's joy, there's regret, there's comedy. Well, but it is a very, very quiet book, I think. And
It
you said,
is.
I think, you said it was a soothing book.
Was very soothing for me to read.
It didn't
Yes, it was
soothe you to
very
sleep, did it?
calming. No, not at
Yeah.
all, not at all. No, on the contrary, I found it so soothing that I just kept on reading and reading and reading it, although it was past my bedtime. So I got up early in the morning with a very heavy head because Henry wouldn't let me sleep. And there was something that also I found very fascinating. I asked myself, why is it so soothing for me to read? And then I realized it has a lot to do with the generational gap that is also there. And my first thought was, I always think about who I'm going to give this book that I'm reading right now, because I always gift books. And on the first few pages, I thought, this is a book for my father. And then in the middle of the book, I said, no, this is a book for my generation, for people in my generation, because it really helps you to understand a generation that is actually on the way out.
And what they're going through.
Exactly, and what they're going through with it. And I think I found that part the most soothing part, to know in the end, although there might have been some differences, it will be fine. Yeah,
Yeah.
It was actually very nice to have this experience.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, one of the readers of Emily said that after they read Emily alone, they knew that they had to treat their own mother a little better.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, if there's one lesson that can come out of the book, maybe that's it. To be more forgiving.
Forgiving.
I think.
That's a good keyword. Something I also really admired about the book is how you get so deeply intimate with Henry, without cynicism, without anything. It's just this warm, very tender approaching him. And how do you do that? How do you get so close with writing? What are the observations you make in a daily life-to-life basis that lead up to such a phenomenal work?
Well, I was lucky. About 20 years ago, I wrote a nonfiction book about the Hartford Circus fire, which happened in 1944. So I ended up interviewing hundreds of people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And they told me not just about their experience with the fire and surviving the fire, but also about what was going on in their lives right then. They talked about their children, their grandchildren, if they'd lost their partners, if they'd lost friends, how the neighborhood around them had changed, how the city had changed, how the world had changed. And I began to think, this is the big story. I think Tolstoy said that the subject of the novel is time, with a big T. And these people had obviously lived a long, long time. And I thought, I should really listen to these people. And so I began to sort of collect their stories. And when I went to do readings about the circus fire, my audiences would be older. And so I knew I was going to write this book about Emily. And so I would hand out a questionnaire for them. And I'd say, who are three people that you no longer see in your life that you wish you saw? How has your neighborhood changed? Name two modern inventions that you hate. Name two modern inventions that you love. Just to see how things had changed with them, because I knew things had changed with Emily. And I love a memory book. I love a book that goes backwards in time. And so for both Emily's book and Henry's book, I knew I'd be writing about their childhoods, how they were not just as these people in their 70s and 80s, but way back when they were 6, 7, and 8 years old. And so it became a life story. And by going back, I think I got a little bit closer. What were they afraid of when they were children? What were their dreams that either did take place or didn't take place? What were their hopes? What were their expectations? We have this expectation about life as children, and when we meet actual life, sometimes it disappoints us. So I wanted to see how they had met those disappointments and kept going and kept going and kept going. And so a lot of my writing since I wrote that book and I met all those people has been about endurance and how we go on. I think is the greatest trait of people, just how they keep going. It's amazing, how much punishment that we can take and just keep going on, keep being hopeful. And I think that's the hardest thing to be, continue being hopeful in life. And yet somehow it's built into us. We just keep going. We never quit.
You already said it. It's actually also a portrayal about the great generation, the greatest generation. We can't call it that over here, especially if we have German ancestors. But the war, the Second World War, is also a big theme in the book. And it was a relatively new awareness you created within me and possibly with other readers as well, especially in Switzerland, because we haven't been to a war for a couple of 100 years now, not involved in one, that a lot of Americans, and almost from every generation, have men that have been to war and just live with it on a daily, day-to-day basis. And it wasn't extraordinary in the book. And was it your decision to make it such a actually very ordinary thing, a very ordinary how he deals with it, how he copes with it, how it's just flashbacks, and sometimes not even bad flashbacks, but good ones? Was it a conscious decision to make it such an ordinary thing in his life, the war?
Yeah. Well, it's something that challenges his view of himself. I think chapter by chapter, even these tiny things are about Henry trying to figure out, how to respond to life and how to respond to things he doesn't understand. And he will never quite understand his participation in the war. He will never quite be able to reconcile himself to the things he did during the war. It doesn't seem like him, and yet he was there. So he's still trying to process these things even now, 50 years later. So they pop up, and he sort of pushes them back down. And that's true also of his romance with Sloane. It pops up in him, and he pushes it back down. So he's always about trying to maintain control. So even when a small thing like, say, going through a stop sign, pops up, his first reaction is to ignore it and say that it didn't happen, that everything is fine. Because after coming back from the war, all he wanted was for everything to be fine. But of course, everything is not fine, even now, so many years later. So it's always about repression for him, which I think is very typical of that generation. Maybe not so much some of the later generations of soldiers who came back from, say, Vietnam or from Iraq or Afghanistan, who've learned that you need to somehow talk about things. You need to let these things out. You need to share these things with other people and don't keep them inside. But Henry, by his personality and also by the time, was never encouraged to do that. So he's kept them from everybody. And also, in a way, he tries to keep them from himself, right? They pop up, they're very vivid, and he needs to get away with it.
Wonderful. Exactly. We already talked about that it's actually a prequel to Emily alone. And I was wondering, from the perspective of a reader and of somebody who writes on his own, was it harder to write Emily's story, or was it harder to write Henry's story? Because Henry already played a role in Emily's life.
Yeah, much harder to write Henry's story, because I was wondering, where is the drama here? With Emily's story, I knew that her life was going to change drastically at the very beginning. There's this initial upset where her world is sort of turned upside down, and she has to find a way to become this new person, this new, stronger person. And that was true also in Wish You Were Here, because Henry has recently died there, so she still doesn't know exactly how to live. Whereas Henry, he's just an old man living his life. Where is the drama, or where's the action in there? And that was very hard to figure out exactly how to structure the book and fit the book together so that you're drawing the reader forward with a story. And yeah, that was very, very hard to do. Some of the structure, I think, it's made of these very tiny bits. So it's almost like having a box of chocolates, right? Every little piece, 2 or 3 pages long, is its own little sort of moral anecdote with a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. And sometimes a funny structure inside that. So it's always a reward, and it's always a resting place. So you're never asked to read like 25 straight pages. So it's always, I see it as like a landing on a stairway. I'm never going to make you, climb up, 100 stairs. So it's only a few stairs at a time. And I took some of this structure from Woolf, of course, but also from Evan Cannell and Mrs. Bridge, which is one of my very favorite books. And I think the structure of Emily and how Emily works owes a great deal to Mrs. And the tone, too. I think the tone in Henry owes a great deal to Mrs. Bridge as well. The sort of gently ironic tone. It's sympathetic and also sort of gently satirical.
But without cynicism.
Well, that's the hardest part, I think. I think Cannell had a problem in Mr. Bridge, which is his sequel to Mrs. Bridge. It seemed to me a very cynical book and a very sort of bitter book, almost blaming Mr. Bridge for being the person that he is. And I don't think I can blame Henry for being the person that he is. He has faults, and he has blind spots to his life. But I don't I don't editorialize on those. And I feature them, I leave that to the reader. I mean, I'm not there to judge the character. The reader will do that anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
You said it's your third book inside the saga about the Maxwell family. Why did you choose Henry? Why not Margaret or Kenny or any other characters of the family? Why was it Henry?
Well, I know Margaret and Kenny pretty well, having written their story in Wish You Were Here. I've been inside their heads before. I know their past. I know their futures. Henry was a total mystery to me. And he is that mystery man that I think a lot of men that age are in the U.S., whereas they don't tell you anything that they're thinking. They're not emotional. They just hold everything inside. They're the cliche, the strong silent type, right? Gary Cooper, or at best John Wayne, right? And they were never asked to be emotional. They were never the emotional center of anything. They were meant to go to work and make money, provide for the family, build the country, build the technology to make the world, and to send America to space and make America this great world power. But they weren't asked to, be fathers that shared their feelings with their children. They just never did that. And Henry's role models weren't that way either. His mother handled everything emotional in their household, where their father was, again, always at work. And he was the rule bringer, right? He was the punisher and the bringer of rules, and that was it. So to me, I mean, my father, my grandfather are mysterious in a way like that. Whereas I think our generation was very different. We were allowed to be emotional. We were allowed to, have feelings and say that we were sad or disappointed. Whereas they weren't at all. They were about success, success, success. And when they did not succeed, they were ashamed and then were quiet about it. Didn't say anything about it. They didn't say they were disappointed. And it's not just true for American culture. I think there are many cultures in the world where people are asked to be either a success or to simply shut up, which was very dangerous.
Yeah, actually, before I read the book, I was reading about it, and I thought, oh wow, a patient portrayal about an old white man, and old white men don't have the best publicity right now.
No, not really.
They really don't.
No.
And at the end of the book, you really managed to make me feel sympathetic with this almost established stereotype of the old white man, and I think that's a huge accomplishment. But I also ask myself, did you portray the last generation of men that really grew up and also suffered beyond a pure patriarchy, or is that just an illusion of mine?
No, I think the patriarchy is also, and this will sound very strange, is also hard on old white men.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a standard that the person is asked to live up to that has nothing to do with being human. I mean, the very first line of the book is, his mother named him Henry after her older brother, a chaplain killed in the Great War, as if he might take his place. So the bar there is very, very high for Henry. He has to be as devout and saintly as his uncle. He has to be as brave and self-sacrificing as his uncle. And the first basic job he ever has is to be an altar boy and to carry a cross, right? So he's asked to do all these things that for an 8-year-old boy are impossible. All he wants to do is go and play with his friends and forget about all the sorrow and sadness. And throughout his life, it comes back to not being good enough there. He's in a position, a totally privileged position, where he's allowed to earn that success and be good enough in an America of the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. But he's always going to fall short. There's an ideal standard there that he simply cannot live up to. And so he always feels that he's wrong and he's just not good enough there.
True that. Now, enough about Henry for the moment. I will come back to Henry later. About you, something I noticed as well. It is playing in Pittsburgh. I think it's never exactly said that it is Pittsburgh, not once, but it is playing in Pittsburgh, and it's your hometown actually, and the hometown of your wife as well. And Henry is a huge Pirates fan, and I think you're one too.
Yes, I am.
Yes.
It's a terrible losing team. Again, disappointment.
Yes.
Disappointment and shame. Yeah.
So after asking, who is Henry, how much Henry is there in you?
I think there's some Henry in me. I mean, Flaubert says, Madame Bovary, c'est moi, right? So, I mean, Henry is me, Emily is me, Margaret is me, Arlene is me, Rufus the dog is me. Fitzgerald said that to write a character, he had to find an emotion that he could understand. And I can find an emotion that I understand in Emily and in Henry and in Margaret, or in Brand in City of Secrets, the book before this one, or in Patty in The Good Wife, or in Arthur or Annie in Snow Angels. And once I find that emotion, then I need to find out who is carrying that emotion and what is their world like. And that's the excitement. That's the thrill of going outside of yourself and into somebody else, which is why I love fiction. And I've always been a great, great reader of fiction because I like to find out how it feels to be someone else. And we can only do that in fiction. That's the only place we can do it. That's, I think, why we love fiction. You say, how does it feel to be you? So in this case, no one really asked me, how does it feel to be, a 75-year-old white man, hanging around the house? But I think it's important, right? And how does it feel to run a Red Lobster? How does it feel to, that's the thrill. It's that leap into somebody else. Saul Bellows says, a writer is simply a reader who is moved to emulation. And I think that's absolutely true for me because I didn't study to be a writer. I was an engineer. And I was an aerospace engineer, and I'd go to work, and I'd come home, and for some reason, I had no plans, but I would go to my basement and write short stories about the people that I had met during the day. I just became fascinated by these other lives. How do people live? And being a fiction writer, I'm allowed to indulge myself totally in that. But I also have to be responsible in representing people, right? So if I'm going to write about an old white man, I need to find out what it means to be an old white man besides myself, right? If I'm writing Emily, I need to find out what is it like to be, 75, 80 years old. And so when I do all these library readings, I'll ask people, if I have questions about my characters, I'll simply ask, because people are very open, and they'll talk to you. If they know that you're genuinely interested, honestly interested, they will tell you. And one of the things when I was writing Emily, and I finished the book, and I took it out on tour, I asked the people, what did I forget? What did I forget to get into the book about being older? And they said, you forgot all the medications that we have to take. And so when I started Henry, I realized one of the sections that I wrote would have to be about all the medications that we older people, now have to take. So I'll read that little section here.
Yes, please do.
And, it's a section called Side Effects. Now that they were home again, he made the trek to the Giant Eagle's pharmacy to refill their prescriptions. It was cheaper than the CVS in East Liberty, and if he sometimes had to wait, he could use the ATM or pick up items Emily had forgotten. All of their information was in the system, yet he still brought the scribbled slip from the doctor as if they might question him. The copays were always changing, the prices outrageous. Despite its claims, Medicare didn't cover everything, and like most Americans their age, they took a lot of pills. The size of the cross-hatched plastic reminder he and Emily relied on, organized by the days of the week, further divided into slots for morning, noon, and night like a tackle box, had become a morbid joke among the children. When Emily turned her ankle, the nurse in the emergency room asked if she was taking any medications. Between the two of them, they couldn't remember all the names. From then on, tempting fate, Henry kept a list in his wallet. Lipitor he took for his cholesterol, like all of his golf buddies. Prilosec let him eat stuffed banana peppers and marinara sauce and drink his whiskey. Warfarin was a blood thinner he took at bedtime to reduce the chance of a stroke, though he noticed now that he bled more easily. Lisinopril replaced metropolol for his blood pressure, still so high that Emily had stopped salting their food, substituting Mrs. Dash and lemon juice. Lasix processed excess water and helped with his blood pressure, but according to the fine print, might have caused his dizziness at Chautauqua, a question he meant to ask the doctor. Chlorocon, a potassium supplement he couldn't take on an empty stomach, knocking it back after breakfast before he brushed his teeth. Dulcolax, which Emily had recommended, kept him regular. Flomax in the commercials was supposed to turn his weak stream into a Niagara, but only made him go more often. Glucophage treated his blood sugar, which hovered on the borderline of diabetes. Neurontin, which he took 3 times a day, tasted like bananas and didn't completely stop the needle-like pains in the soles of his feet. Lumigan was an eye drop for glaucoma he took at night that stung and left his vision too blurry to read. Ambien he'd quit taking because it didn't work, and when it did, it made him groggy. Centrum Silver was the multivitamin Jeff's nursing home gave its older patients. Vicodin he had left over from his knee. Margaret said it was dangerous, but when a storm was coming and Advil wasn't enough, he was glad that he had it. Aleve, Bufferin, NyQuil, Dayquil, Sudafed, Benadryl. The medicine cabinet was full of antihistamines and analgesics for colds and bug bites and minor aches and pains like his back after weeding. Emily had read somewhere that aspirin was bad for the kidneys and that Tylenol mixed with alcohol did liver damage. So he was more likely, after golfing or mowing the lawn, to ask her to rub some Bengay into his shoulders, but not often. He tried to stay active, walking Rufus 3 times a day, twice when it rained. And while she complained about her hands every night at bedtime, showing him her swollen knuckles, just a blur after his eye drops. He was grateful at his age there was nothing seriously wrong with him. Most of the time, he felt fine. Thank you. Thank you. This next small section fits in with that, losing his capabilities. It's called Whole Life. He was worth more dead than alive. So was she. The stock market rose and fell, but death was a sure bet. The problem, as always, was the timing. By design, since he'd retired, he used their Social Security checks to cover their premiums. A happy trade-off initially, secure in the knowledge that one of them, Emily, most certainly, would receive the full lump sum benefit. Except now that with their carriers' annual increases, and since men didn't live as long as women, his payments had ballooned, so that with each month he continued to breathe, he was losing money. So many of their investments were failing. True or not, it was especially galling to think that as an asset, he was depreciating. With all of their sunk costs, it was too late to get out, though occasionally their agent pitched him on converting to whole life. The idea was tempting, having access to the money they'd built up over the decades. But if they switched, they'd lose a good bit of it. And at their age, borrowing, even against themselves, was dangerous. The premiums for whole life were also higher, the original source of his discontent. The prudent move, he knew, was to stay the course. Yet every month he felt like a fool, mailing off a hefty check for himself and Emily, receiving in return nothing but another bill. As with any investment, he needed to take the long view, which in this case, as in no other, was guaranteed. Overall, he thought, it was a small price to pay for a little peace of mind. This last section I'm going to read, very short, fits in as well with him losing his capabilities. It's called A Tough Cookie. Though he might joke, there was no denying that his memory, like his strength, was going. More and more often, he caught himself breaking off in mid-sentence, unable to find the right word, or halfway across a room, turning on his heel to retrieve a tool or a piece of paper he needed. For tortuously long seconds, he forgot what simple household items were called, or struggled to put names to faces. Sharp as the day they met, Emily had a store of knowledge he relied on when he couldn't recall something. In this case, an actress from the past. I have no idea who you're talking about. She was a big star right after the war. I can see her face. Blonde, brunette, dark hair, big eyes. Betty Davis. Taller. Greta Garbo. American, a dame. Lauren Bacall? No. What kind of character did she play? A tough cookie. Joan Crawford. Like Joan Crawford, but not as classy. More of a broad, always snapping her gum. A big star who snapped her gum. Now I really have no idea. Sorry. That's all right. It'll come to me. The next day, when it did, he held on to it like a prize to tell her. Joan Bennett. What about her? Nothing. I just couldn't think of her name. Emily shook her head. You're lucky that I love you. I know, he said. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Leaning towards its ends, I have a few questions left for you. I have a lot of questions left for you, but I don't know if you all want to listen. So I will pose a few more questions, and then the audience is really invited to ask themselves questions and use this opportunity. You have like about 7 minutes or so.
A short essay,
yeah, a short essay, exactly, to think about something. Before you started reading those wonderful passages, you were talking about the emotion that you needed to feel to really get to a character. What emotion was that with Henry?
For Henry, I think it's mostly confusion. He's confused by life not going the way he wants it to go. He's very logical, very rational. He thinks that if he pushes a button on a computer, it should work. And I think that's his heritage as a technical person. He thinks things should just work. Because when he was an engineer, he designed things so that they would work for other people. And so the modern world confuses him, especially cell phones and computers and just the way people are nowadays.
I think the political discourse nowadays is talking a lot about the future and how our future will be, especially in the age of climate change. And then there's this character, Henry, that does not really have a future. And that only has his past and present. And Hermann Hesse once said, there's magic in every beginning. So I ask myself, what lies in the end?
The ultimate question, right?
No.
Yes.
While we still are alive.
Yeah. I mean, and what do we have to look forward to,
Mhm.
right? I mean, as people that don't believe they're going to die, right? Because we're not going to die.
No,
we're just not going to die.
Never going to die.
It's not going to happen. We always have these things to look forward to. Henry has, I think, gone beyond that point at some place. He knows he's going to die. He understands that very, very deep in his bones.
And he's not afraid.
He's a little bit afraid of what he's leaving behind because he doesn't want to leave Emily with all these problems. He wants to take care of all of Emily's problems that she's going to face after he's dead, which we know from Emily alone that she finds a way to do it because she's very resourceful. She is not confused by the world. You know, she finds that she has a great strength in her, I think. And Henry, I think this may be part of his weakness there at the end is that he doesn't feel a future at all, which is kind of a terrifying thing. To be faced with the evidence of your own mortality over and over and over, and to bear that, to carry that alone, I think is very hard. And I think Henry does that. I think he thinks he's expected to do that. And Emily asked him not to do that. He tries to joke about it early in the book. He says, well, I'm going to die before you will, because that's always been a joke they have. It's no longer a joke. Yeah. It's real. It's absolutely real. And she says, don't do that. And that confuses him as well, because now he doesn't have a way to talk about it. Now he's truly stuck with it himself. In that sense, it can be a very sad book, I think. But it is, I hope it's leavened by the comedy of slapstick and Rufus, and the great love and devotion that Henry has for, I think, everyone around him.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. He was a very loving character. And I also think it ended on a high note. It really ended on a... I felt good when it ended. I felt good for Henry, so I hope you have the same experience.
Well, there's always that worry also in Emily that the reader's like, don't kill him, don't kill him, don't kill him. No, you can't kill him. It's a quiet book, and let me say that it ends maybe on the very quietest scene in the book.
Exactly.
I think. And it was a scene that I just sort of ran into and just found all of a sudden. I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. It's there. And sometimes that happens, and other times you have to sort of work it and really be meticulous about it. In this case, it made absolute sense. It seemed very natural. Just maybe because I've been with them for so long. It's like the end of Emily seemed very natural just because I knew who she was. And my hope was that if I could get close to Henry throughout the book and find out who he was, that by the end of the book, the reader would know exactly who he was. And that seems to me what the book was supposed to be. Deliver his emotional world to the reader in the most powerful way possible. Very average, regular, but very special person, I think. And I hope it did that.
I'm quite sure it did. Was that the emotion that you wanted the reader to have when he puts aside the book? A light note, a slight sadness, or just empathy?
Well, I mean, what is important to Henry? What's the most important thing in the world to Henry? And I found out when I was writing the book, it's Emily, right? It's all Emily. So it seemed fitting to end right there, because when I was writing the book, in the first drafts, I thought, oh, I'm writing this book, it's just Henry's book. But in the end, it really is a portrait of their marriage there. And it ends on that note of, and I think it ties up both Emily's book and Henry's book, and it puts them all together in a way that I wasn't sure how they fit together. So by the end of Henry's book, I know exactly how and why they fit together. They're kind of perfect for each other.
There it is. You will all have to read all 3 books. Before I leave the questions to the audience, will there be another spin-off? Will we meet them again? Emily and Henry and Margaret and Kenneth.
You never know. I never thought that I'd even write Emily's book. I thought I was done with the family. And then 8 years later, I just started thinking, oh, what's she up to? What's she doing now? And I became fascinated by her. So I never say never.
I'm rooting for Rufus.
Well, I was in Munich. I was in Munich the other night, and these 2 women came over. They said, "Are you going to write a book about Arlene?" And I said, "Oh, Arlene." And they're like, "Please do, please do." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I'm up for it." another old person book. Maybe I'll write a young person book in between, and I don't know, or something
with
crazy.
The grandchildren.
Well, this is such a quiet book. I think of Stoner by John Williams, a book that I really, really love. It's that has that kind of tone. The book I wrote before this, I blow up a whole hotel. So, maybe I'll do a loud book and then a quiet book, a loud book and a quiet book.
That's a good rhythm. Perfect. Thank you so much. That was it from me. Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Oh, gentlemen. Yeah.
Are you in contact with your best readers, namely the people who translate your books?
Yes. The question is, am I in contact with my translators, who are my best readers, who translate the book? Thomas Gunkel has been my translator into German since 1994. Every single book, he's translated, I want to say 3,000 pages of mine. And when he first met the Maxwell family in the book Wish You Were Here, or Abscheid von Chautauqua, he said, "These people are so annoying, I hate them. Please don't write about them again. I don't want to spend time with them." And since then, he's had to do another 600 pages. So, yeah. He's a wonderful, wonderful translator and very dedicated, devoted, meticulous. And I know when he's translating because on Friday morning, I'll wake up and there will be a 5-page email with all the things that he has questions about. And like my editor in the States, he makes me justify every single mark on the page. He makes me think about, what it really, really means. I'm a pretty meticulous writer, being, an engineer. I'm a very detail-oriented person, but he will find things that I haven't even thought of. He's amazing. And the fact that he can turn my prose into a kind of poetry in German, which is a very difficult language, especially with all the hard consonants in there, the G's and the F's and the Z's. And it's brilliant, I think. I've translated some French poetry, and I find it so hard to do because I just don't have vocabulary. And sometimes when I'm writing in English, there isn't a word for what I want to say. And so I have to find the word that is closest to it, and I agonize over that. I mean, to do that for a living, and it's not a great living. You don't make a lot of money for it. You have to really love it. So hats off to Thomas Gunkel. And as I always say, he's sold far more books in Germany than I ever have. So yes. In the back.
I'm just wondering, the Democratic Party, like the frontrunners, they're now two rather age-advanced guys, and it looks like one of them will face an even older guy. And I was just wondering what you're thinking, what this says about contemporary America.
Old white men, yeah. Why do we want another old white man? It's a damn shame, I think. Right now Joe Biden, I guess, is the front runner. No one's really excited about voting for him as a Democrat. They're excited about voting against Trump. That's something. Bernie Sanders, last time in 2016, I give the American voters some credit, right? I mean, Hillary Clinton was widely hated by many people. She wasn't a candidate that excited very many people. People were going to vote for her despite her vote for the Iraq War, for her support of big business and all that. And on the left, we were just going to sort of hold our noses and vote for Hillary Clinton so we could beat Trump. In the primaries, Bernie Sanders, old white man, came out and was actually rather exciting. The young people were excited about voting for him. Other Democrats to the left were excited about voting for him. But the Democratic Party had decided that Hillary Clinton was going to be the candidate. The Republican Party had decided that Jeb Bush would be the candidate, but no Republicans wanted to vote for Jeb Bush. And so when Donald Trump did very well in the primaries, like Bernie Sanders did very well in the primaries, the Republicans decided, okay, someone's excited about this guy, let's go with him rather than the guy we picked. The Democrats couldn't do that. They stuck with the person that they picked instead of going with Bernie. There were 4 candidates in 2016. Jeb Bush, the most boring human being in America, right? Donald Trump, the biggest asshole in America. Hillary Clinton, the most hated woman in America. And Bernie Sanders, one of 2 self-declared socialists. If Bernie Sanders had run in the final election, he could have won. He could have won. If you had paired him with the right vice presidential candidate, he could have won. One of 2 socialists in the entire country would have been the president. That's how bad our candidates were. So I can't fully blame the public, for electing the biggest asshole in America because they were given poor candidates. This has been true my entire life. The only candidates that people were really excited about voting for in my lifetime was Barack Obama. That was it. We've had to vote for Al Gore, the dullest person in America besides Jeb Bush, right? George W. Bush was a 2-term president in my lifetime and killed millions of people with his policy decisions and with Dick Cheney's policy decision. Ronald Reagan was a 2-term president in my lifetime as well, an actor who knew nothing. Bill Clinton was a two-term president by moving the Democratic Party to the right and by becoming the party of big business and opening the World Trade Organization and becoming this global, open for business, which moved a lot of jobs overseas. So it's not as if we've had wonderful choices. Are these choices any better this year or next year? No, definitely not. Is anybody happy about it? No, definitely not. Will it be a horrible next year all the way up to the election? Yes, it will. It will be awful and terrible. And we look at England and we say, in England, you only have 6 weeks. You're only allowed to campaign for 6 weeks, that's it. And in America, we're like, please, let's be more like England. Not about Brexit, no, not about that. That's a total mess over there. So yeah, it's going to be tough. It's going to be very tough. In Emily alone, in Emily's book, the year is 2008, and she's a Republican. She's been a Republican her entire life, and she's looking at the candidates that she has to choose from in the primary presidential election. And she looks at them and she's like, why isn't there a good, solid conservative Republican like Bob Dole, who is also an incredibly boring politician? But that's the kind of person that she would feel safe voting for. She sees Obama and she says, oh, he's only been a junior senator. We don't know who this person is. We have no idea who he is. And she's a little afraid of him because he's half African American. And so she doesn't want to vote for any of the candidates, but she goes in and she holds her nose and she votes for John McCain. And she comes out and she's very proud of having voted, right? Even though she voted for someone that she didn't really care about, but she continued to vote Republican. And that's what a lot of people do. That's what Henry would have done. Henry would vote for Nixon, even though he personally would despise the way Nixon behaved, right? He'd vote for Reagan, even though he wasn't a great fan of Reagan. He's going to vote the party line. And that's what's wrong with America today.
Yes, thank you very much for sharing your lines with us. And I would like to know a little bit more about you as a writer, as an author. I'd like to know, do you have a reader in mind? Like when you look at what you have been writing during the day, do you look at it like how would people read it, or you just don't care and do your thing? And as I have the microphone now, second question is, can you switch off the writer inside yourself? Like when you're with your lovely wife, with family, friends, or are you still somehow with the characters? Thanks.
Well, I'll answer the second one first because it's fresher. I can't turn it off. I'm always going to be a writer. I'm always going to be gathering information, details, conversations, lines of dialogue. I'm always going to be stealing from real life to put it into this fictional life, to provide life to that fictional world. The ideal reader, it depends upon the book. The ideal reader for Henry himself would be a man of Henry's age. I don't want to fool a reader that doesn't understand that world. I mean, if I'm writing about Vietnam, I want a Vietnam vet to read the book and not just say, oh, he got it right. I want him to say, oh my God, I forgot about that. That reminds me. So I want to write it for the people that have lived through the experience already, and so that they can bring their emotions to that page, join their real life and their emotions with this fictional world, and have something greater, have a larger world, more extension into the world. I think you can fool the reader about most worlds, and I don't think that's fair, I think. You know, when you know a world and you see it on TV and they fake something, you go, oh, that's terrible. That doesn't work that way in real life. It's like the horror movie. You know, we have one flashlight, so let's split up. You go down in the basement. I'll go up in the attic where I hear those terrible noises. You want it to be real to the people that have lived through it, and that's that responsibility in representing a world, especially when you're representing a world that you've never lived in, or that is not your world. And I typically write about worlds that I don't know much about. Hemingway said, "Write what you know," and Joanna Scott, one of my favorite writers, says, "Write what you want to know. Let your curiosity take you to a place and guide you. But once you get there, ask people who are there and who've lived through it what it's like." I mean, one of the things that I asked about the Red Lobster, I would ask servers who worked at Red Lobsters, I say, what do I have to make sure I get into my book about the Red Lobster? And they said something I would not have known. They said, you have to make sure you get the mother in who does not control the child and lets the child just go crazy in the restaurant. And so I made sure that I got that in there. So that when they read the book, they're like, oh, look at that. So yeah, I mean, first-person sources are really important. And there's a little bit of that engineering background in me of gathering data, gathering a lot of data, and then crushing that data down and cherry-picking the very best bits of it to get across what is a typical experience for my character. And then there are other books where I just totally make the shit up. Totally crazy. I mean, A Prayer for the Dying is set in a place that's long ago and far away, and it's just a crazy, crazy book with a crazy narrator. The Speed Queen, set in Oklahoma of the 1990s, and the meth epidemic is, a lot of that's just crazily made up stuff. I did some interviews for it with addicts and people that worked in prisons, people that worked in fast food, but a lot of it just letting the imagination sort of run wild there. But these more meticulous books, I do want to talk to people that have lived through the experience, especially if I'm writing what I consider some sort of realism, or in the case of Henry or Emily, almost a super realism. Thank you.
Any more questions? Well, maybe questions I have. Has Netflix or Amazon approached you about putting that into a series?
Right now, we're in negotiations with a very interesting woman director who sees Speed Queen as a feminist parable and wants to turn it into sort of a proto-feminist premium TV series there, because the main characters in that book are both women, and the male character is kind of a dumbass. It's a perfect vehicle, I think, for female stars and female writers and directors. And she sort of just grabbed that and wants to do it. Prayer for the Dying also is right now being made by not Norwegian. She's Polish, but she's using Norwegian money to make it. So there's always film interest, and sometimes you have to say, will it actually happen or not? You never know. They always say, oh, we're definitely getting it done. We're going to start shooting next week. We have the actor. For a while, Ewan McGregor was attached to A Prayer for the Dying, and Ewan McGregor was like my dream actor for this character. Like, hey, yes, this is going to work out. And it didn't work out at all. There was a beautiful script made by a British film actor named Michael Gambon. It's a lovely, lovely script for it. I was like, this is perfect. Never got made. Christina Ricci was going to film Speed Queen. It was going to be her directorial debut. Never happened. Last Night at the Lobster. Several times they've been sort of fits and starts, and they send me checks. I can't really speak badly of them. They send me, but they do get you excited, because some of these books are books that you'd really love to see a movie made of it. I'm a huge movie fan. Sometimes I'll steal bits from movies and build them into the books. The opening of Last Night at the Lobster is stolen from Psycho. It's that long shot that Hitchcock has. He zooms in, he zooms through the window, and there's Janet Leigh with the suitcase on the bed, and there's the money next to it, and it's like, through the window, let's see it there. And the opening of City of Secrets is a straight steal from Touch of Evil. Again, that long tracking shot that Wells does there at the border. So I'm a huge cinema fan. I'd love to see them do it. And the one that was made into a film, Snow Angels, I thought the director, David Gordon Green, did a really nice job with it. He did a very stylish job. He got the mood of it just right. And I was watching it and looking at some of the lines that I loved in it, and they were like all his lines. They weren't mine. And I was like, that's a great line. It's like, that's not in the book. It's not in the book. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. You want the film to be the director's vision and the screenwriter's vision, and bring their own art to it, because it's a separate thing. It has to be its own piece, its own work of art. Stephen King famously hates Kubrick's adaptation of The Shining. I love Stephen King's novel, The Shining. I love Kubrick's film, The Shining. They're two separate things, and I can enjoy them both. I don't hold one against the other. So yeah, make a movie of one of my books, I'll come. I'll come and see it. Thank you, Rito. Thank you, Anya, so
Thank
much.
you so
Thank
much,
you all for
Stewart.
coming out tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for selling books. Thank you. And I will happily sign books back there in the dark.